Okay, it's we're live again. Another week, another script. How's it going, my friend?
Going well. How about with you?
Yeah, things are going pretty good. Um, yeah, the only hiccup I had this week is that I caught sinitis for about 12 hours, and that stunk. Outside of that, I'm back to normal. My voice came back. It's the weather's changed. Gets a little colder. So yeah, more susceptible to getting catching a little cold here and there. But fortunately for me, I recovered quite quickly. So I'm happy because I was a little worried that I'd have like a hoarse voice or sound way more nasally than I normally do, which is already pushing my personal limits for myself.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough this time of year. You definitely got to make sure you got Sudafed and Mucinex, whatever your preferred
hmm
decongestant brand is.
Oh yeah, totally. Like that's one of the things. Because since the pandemic, I haven't actually gotten sick very much at all. And if I have, it's been very short stints of like a cold or what have you. So I haven't had to buy like an anti-inflammatory or a decongestant in a while. So when I this hit me the other day in the morning, I go to the medicine cabinet and I look at the pills. It's like, oh, these all expired like last year. Son of a gun! I got to go get new ones. So that was my only hiccup. But it's like, okay, yeah, that's actually kind of a good sign that you're fairly healthy. It's that you have leftover decongestants that you haven't needed to use and have actually gone bad. But that's the only drama that I had this week.
You mean you
Uh,
didn't have that ivermectin just sitting in the cabinet ready to go?
no. I should invest in some of that because I had it once when I was in high school for an infection that was did wonders, but never needed it since. But no, that's a good idea. Yeah, should probably go grab some. I mean, it's cheap, and the guys who
Yep.
discovered it won a Nobel Prize, so that's some good vetting there. At least when they won the Nobel Prize, it meant something.
Yeah, it was a wonder drug up until 2020, and now it'll be a wonder drug again after. Well, it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's right. Lots have changed since the last couple episodes. It's been interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, you could say that it's like a feeding frenzy of media stuff, like much like we're going to be talking about with our script today.
Yeah, it's very quote unquote ferocious, if you will. So it sounds like we're coming through loud and clear for on the chat side of things. So thank you very much for that. Let's get started. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I'm your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is Lil Chad. So happy to have you here for this one, sir. Um,
Yeah,
it's
glad to be here.
yeah, like I like having you back along with all the other co-hosts here. We're getting close to the end of the year, and I definitely want to figure out a time to kind of get as many of us as we can back together and just talk about the scripts we've read over the last year and any sort of additional
Do
thoughts.
do a year in review party kind of show.
Yeah,
Sounds
because I
pretty
think
good.
that'd be fun. That'd be fun because it's because we've got the 2024 blacklist is just around the corner to being released. I've heard some interesting things about that, so I'm looking forward to see what the final list is going to be, because that could give us some interesting insights on the direction of the industry, which my experience over the past year has seen it going in the right direction, in my opinion. Like, there's a little bit more risk with regards to um, types of movies being made, types of people that are being hired, usually more veterans and people that have that good work ethic to kind of be inventive. So I wonder if that's going to hold true. And I'll cross my fingers it does, because the box office has had like a mixed year this year, but the quality of films has definitely
Yep.
been of a higher level than previous years. So
Yeah. The mixed year continues. As we're recording this, Red One is opening to not so great numbers for its budget level.
well,
So
there's a number of reasons for that. I have a story about that movie I can't disclose publicly, but I'll tell you afterwards since you brought it up because it is
Ooh.
kind of fascinating. However, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, I've said this on other streams. Tom from Midnight's Edge, he's done the legwork to confirm it, and he's kind of like the big arbiter of it. Dwayne The Rock Johnson is just not a movie star, and he doesn't bring
Dwayne The
in
Rock Johnson is a perfectly acceptable lead actor if you keep your budget in the 60 to 70 million range.
right.
That's the cutoff.
And on top of that, he's way better. He's in his more higher profile movies are the ones where he is not 100% the main star, but he's definitely part of the ensemble.
Yeah, which is why Fast and Furious and the Jumanji movies are his best successes.
Right. So, yeah. Gosh, Red One. Like, there's. Oh man, I'll tell you that after the show. That'll be something fun. Tonight's script, though, comes from, of course, the 2023 Blacklist. It is titled Ferocious, and it placed 58 on that list with 8 votes. It's written by Marc Bloom. Now, Marc Bloom, he's been around for a short while. His biggest credit to fame is called Shaft 6, which is not a sequel to John Shaft. It's actually about a mining shaft film. He's done a couple of other smaller stuff. He's got some fairly decent representations. So, my hats off to him. He's got some good guys there over at House Fire Management, which is a decent starting agency. Well, not starting, but decent agency to have when you're in your early parts of your career. The logline for Ferocious is as follows. A team of financially desperate hotel employees embark on a deadly treasure hunt to recover priceless diamonds from a wrecked yacht in the middle of the Red Triangle, the world's most dangerous hunting grounds for great white sharks. Little Chad, what is the synopsis of this script?
Yeah, so the synopsis is as follows. Nell, a fearless dive instructor, gathers a scrappy crew of outcasts to hatch a daring plan to recover millions in diamonds from a sunken yacht. They believe it's their ticket to freedom from a life of dead-end jobs and broken dreams. But as the wreck lies deep within the shark-infested waters of the infamous Red Triangle, the team must navigate deadly predators, their own fractured loyalties, and a sinister secret hidden within the wreck. Will their determination and grit be enough to survive the dangers below, or will the ocean claim everything they're fighting for? Ooh. And that is a misleading synopsis and a half after having read the script. Because starting with line 1, man, Nell gathers a scrappy crew. Yep. Spoiler, Nell is the one being gathered. She is not the gatherer.
It is actually the character of Claire. Claire's her name.
Claire. Yeah.
I was going to say Cecilia, but that's not the right name
That's
at all.
how memorable she was.
Yes, pretty much. Unfortunately, that is how memorable she was. But yeah, so this is a plan that's kind of hatched by Claire. But for the first few pages of the script, we get an homage to Jaws. We get a young, beautiful woman who's on a raft, all alone in the ocean, and she cuts her hand, blood drips into the water, and then all of a sudden she is taken by something. We don't know what it is. When I initially read the log line, I was hoping that this would be more than just a great white shark thing. I was hoping for something a bit more on the supernatural side. And spoilers but not spoilers. Unfortunately, no, it's exactly great white sharks. That's what it is. It's man versus beast type. Yeah. Which is not a bad thing. I was just hoping for a little more. We're 100%
in a man versus beast / man versus man scenario. There's no supernatural stuff.
Although I do think if they did throw in a supernatural element, it probably would have done more for this. But basically, our main character is Nell Weaver. She's in her mid-20s. She has a girlfriend named Claire, same age, but she's from South Africa, but not the white part of South Africa. There's a very weird connotation behind why she's living in San Francisco as a diving instructor at this resort with Nell. Because last I checked, the apartheid ended like 25, 26 years ago.
The apartheid would have ended before she was even born.
Right.
Like by a decade.
And yet she's talking about it as if it's still a thing. And like I haven't been keeping up with South Africa much over the last 10 years, but I
My knowledge of the South African political environment is that currently the the people being oppressed in a, yeah, whatever you want to call it.
sure.
The issues are that the ruling majority political party are turning a blind eye to nefarious means being used to evict Afrikaner white farmers from their land. So
Right.
I was like, I was doing, I like you, I was doing the math. All right, these girls are supposed to be in their early 20s, and it's 2024, so this would have been around the early 2000s. Where is the apartheid experience that they have? What's going on?
Right. I'm like, what is this supposed to be an alternate timeline universe? If so, could you please elaborate a little on that? So that part threw me off a little bit. I actually had no problem with how they introduced Nell and Clara as like a couple, because it felt very kind of natural. Didn't feel like it was making any sort of prominent point or commentary or anything of that nature. But what we kind of figure out is that Nell, she's just kind of going day by day. She's not really, doesn't really have a goal set in mind. She doesn't really have much of like dreams or fantasy. She's just sort of there, but she cares about her mom, who's Kelly, who's a little, who we were talking about this before the show, but so Kelly is described as being in the early 50s, Nell's mom, and she said that and the script says that Kelly had Nell when she was a little too young, which made us have to do math again. We're just like, if she's 26, and she's in her 50s, you cut that in half. That put her at around between 22 to 26 years of age to have a child, which is not too young. It's if you're old enough to be out of college, you're in that right age of getting married, having starting a family. If that was your goal, it's not too young to start a family.
Logistically speaking, that is the standard age people are having children.
Right.
Usually, in terms of the spectrum of having kids, early 20s to 30 is the norm. Over 30 is considered having kids late.
Yeah.
Under 20 is having kids young. It's like, if you're a teen, that's when you're having kids young.
Exactly, and that is not, if the writer meant to say, oh, Kelly's in her early 40s and she had her young, I'd be like, yeah, I can understand that. That makes sense, because that's puts her in her, at the very least, late teens.
I would have said, yeah, like, or like have Kelly have Nell be like mid 30s.
Right.
So that would mean that someone, depending on the 50s, right, that you're going with, she could be anywhere from like 19 to like 14 or 15 for like the child being born.
Right.
And that's also a scenario where I from my wife was one of 10 kids. Her mom started having children very early.
Mm-hmm.
And like, when I say early, I mean like 15.
Oh, wow. That is early.
So
yeah.
that I can say early. So there is a dynamic where like the oldest kid from when a parent has a child that young ends up being a very overly responsible person, because they tend to, their parent was a child when they had them. So they end up kind of having a dynamic where they grow up fast.
Mm-hmm.
Try and end up being sort of a parent almost to their own parent. They become a very serious individual, and I thought that would have been a good dynamic here, but it's not explored, and that's not what they do, because it would have, Nell's character seems like she's more of a, even though she's floating through life, with what we do get, someone who's kind of serious and responsible. She doesn't seem like an irresponsible, like, flight of fancy type.
Right.
And Kelly, her mom still seems that way. They make reference to her still smoking joints with her boyfriend in front of, like, with her daughter, like having to clean up after her and put a blanket on her when she falls asleep on the couch. Those are elements that I think would have worked better if all you have to do, I would just shift Nell's age up about 10 years and you'd be fine.
Yeah, that would make a little bit more sense. Now, the other aspect with Kelly is that she's got early onset Parkinson's, and she's basically like a maid and waitstaff at the resort. So you get a sense.
And set in San Francisco, by the way.
Yeah, set in the San Francisco Bay Area. Very important here. We also have that Kelly's, has a boyfriend named Russell, who's a former helmsman and captain. He's kind of gambled his life away, but he runs the Crystal Tide booze cruise of the resort.
Yep.
And again, the script makes another horrible little commentary, which is that they talk about how Rusty and Kelly are in a relationship that's pure bliss, but it remarks how it's very late in their lives with regards to love. And I'm thinking, whatever happened to be like better late than never? It's just, it doesn't
Also, when
matter.
they say very late in their life, they're in their 50s.
Yeah,
This is not like this isn't like the Notebook situation where they're 90 plus years old in a memory care facility.
yeah.
They're in their 50s. I don't know about you, but I'm not that far from my 50s, and I wouldn't consider myself like, oh, my life's over. Like,
No, like I'm a good decade from my 50s, and like to your point, yes, I'm not a father yet, but my girlfriend's in the right in the early 30s age where it's still fine. Um, Actually, I had a friend. She's 42. She just gave birth a few weeks ago. Baby boy, very healthy. Uh, Alarmingly adept and smart so far. Already able to pick up objects, and I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Um, but regardless, like, listen, medical science is pretty good right now when it comes to child rearing and development. So some of the notions that are peppered throughout this script make me really scratch my head as to what world and what time period is this guy living
really
in.
is a running theme in this script where there's a lot of dubious at best assumptions
Hmm.
and choices about science and knowledge and general operations of things.
Yeah.
You really have to like operate on a real suspension of disbelief. Like you mentioned, where it's like, is this some alternate universe? I wonder if it might be because there's a lot of things that don't hold up to scrutiny in our world the way it is in 2024. So it's just
Yeah, because I mean, there's one of the good things about this script has a very low character count. The next character that is involved in this is called Lucas. He's a 30 ex-Navy SEAL. He lost an arm. I don't know which arm he lost, whether it's the left or right, because they weren't very specific on that. But he's also Nell's ex-boyfriend. He still has a soft spot for her, but he's working at the resort. I'm not even sure like what his position is. Is he like management, or I don't know what he is, but he's
so
there.
this is an interesting thing because he's apparently been rejected several times by the VA, which is the Veterans Administration here in the United States,
Hmm.
for disability coverage. And I'm like, what the F? He was a Navy SEAL and he lost an arm, presumably in some kind of combat situation
Yeah,
or military related training. It's somehow related to the military service.
and he has
And
a prosthetic, which it's not really described if it's advanced or basic, but
yeah,
apparently it's something that does the job.
but here's the weird thing. Like I can tell you, like I know somebody who was in the Navy, not even a SEAL, who just has a wrist injury and got rated like 100% disabled.
Wow.
And he can still work just fine. Like he still don't tell, like
Yeah,
so it's like the idea that someone loses an arm and wouldn't get a disability rating is ridiculous.
it's absurd. It's
It's absurd. And that he lives in California and that he then wouldn't be able to lawyer up and get representation to then proceed to lawsuit territory for the denial of the disability status. It's which also brings up her mom because there's a through line in the script where she's being abused at work by a manager for her Parkinson's tremors, which is causing her to have issues like lifting things and cleaning because she's a maid.
yep.
And I'm supposed to believe because I work in a situation where I have a lot of experience, and it is well known within the HR community, the two states that you absolutely can't get away with anything, even regular workplace like discipline actions, are California and New York
Yep.
because they have their laws written in such a way that if you as an employer do that kind of stuff, you will get sued into oblivion. And there's more labor lawyers in California than any other state in the country for a reason. So it's so ridiculous.
It really, I mean, it's designed specifically to try to make us empathize with the characters, which I think it would be there if this didn't take place in California. Maybe if this took place in Hawaii, I could probably buy a little bit of that, especially for the VA discrimination stuff, because they're so far away from the mainland. There's certain logistics you could probably play into to explain why he's being rejected or denied or what have you. And then, of course, for the labor laws at a hotel resort, if you've got a 50-year-old woman who's got early onset Parkinson's and she's not telling her employer that she's got this medical condition, and the employer is justifiably wondering why she keeps screwing up, then you can completely understand, oh, yeah, she's not reporting it because insurance won't cover it, so it's all money that Nell is making is going to her medication that she's doing on the side because, she could be terminated or be enforced early retirement with very little severance, very little pension payout, and it's better for her to struggle to have this job because that's how they can actually stay alive, pay their bills, buy food, etc., than her being essentially deemed unable to work and also at risk of not qualifying for any disability. So yeah, like there's already all these logistics that the script kind of sidelines, all to show up of Claire, who's the one that has all these pictures on her phone about returning back to South Africa because it's a lot cheaper to live there now, and they could start up their own private dive school. And this is such an offhanded goal that you don't even feel like Nell, who's supposed to be our main character, is really on board with this.
Yeah, and so we've been via the script, we're shown that she's a dive instructor, that she teaches people at this resort the basics of scuba diving.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not super happy with it because the people at this high-end resort are not nice. They're not taking her knowledge and experience seriously.
They're the top 1% of 1%ers that are drunk and throwing up and not listening to her. They're there to have a good time, and she's stuck having to be responsible enough to teach them what they need to know if they want to scuba dive, or else it's her butt on the line if there's an injury. And it's just really more obnoxious than it is like, oh, I feel sorry for her.
Exactly. It's and again, what's interesting is that she's not really in the theme for this movie is that she's not really into any of the stuff people suggest. Like her girlfriend
right
is suggesting this dive school in South Africa, and she's kind of like, whatever. And we get to the point where we get the setup and we get the real like movement towards the the conflict of the story, which is the heist. And she, like I said in that synopsis, being very misleading, she's not into that at all.
No.
She's the one who's like, no, we should not do this. I'm not in.
The way they discover the story is also another antiquated point because they're watching TV, and then a breaking news event occurs, and Claire's about to change the channel, yet Nell says, no, don't change it. I want to see this. And we're like, this is the first time Nell has shown any set of curiosity in public offense or affairs or anything of that nature. Like, she's been so internalized that her saying, hey, keep it on the news, of all things, and on over-the-air traditional television in their very cramped houseboat really threw me off a little bit. And what does the news say? Well, it's like this son of a billionaire who's got over 1 million or so followers across all the socials. His yacht has sunk about 2 hours west off the coast of San Francisco Bay. And Coast Guard can't seem to find the boat. They have returned, and they may or may not be heading out to search for it again. We as the audience are left to infer that the lady on the lifeboat that we saw earlier was a passenger on the private yacht, and so Nell then starts going through this rich guy's socials and finds his latest post was a video of him showing off his yacht with like drone footage and stuff, and then showing off his very expensive diamonds that he puts in this tiny safe in his bedroom. And then all of a sudden the boat rocks, and then the feed cuts out. And apparently this was a live stream. That's why it was recorded, and that's why you can watch it. Is that he was just live streaming, and then that's when the storm, whatever that caused his boat to sink, managed to occur. And then Claire comes up with the idea, is like, we could go and find that boat and then take those diamonds, and we could have our dream life. And Nell is, the Debbie Downer. At what point does this work? How do we can't go out there. If the Coast Guard can't find it, we can't find it. It's like, well, we don't need the Coast Guard because foolish internet billionaire son guy advertised all the details of his yacht and where it was going to be on his socials. All we have to do is look at that. And here I am reading this and thinking, well, surely
the Coast Guard be able to do the same thing?
Yeah, shouldn't the Coast Guard, with cooperation from the Navy, be able to do the exact same thing, trying to find where this yacht sank? So it stretches credulity.
It does, and that's one of the biggest thing that just broke me on the script is the stretches, like all these little breaks. They start small and they keep getting bigger. They keep getting bigger and bigger with the things. I'm all for suspension of disbelief, especially like if it's fantasy or sci-fi. Interstellar was a great one for me. Like I was all on board with Interstellar because they set up their own rules and they followed their own rules and they kept consistent with their rules. So I'm okay with it. It's when you're doing things that are ostensibly just supposed to be real world, nothing special, no like special intergalactic space technology to do something. You're just we're just here in San Francisco and here it's just the real world. Don't start making like weird things that don't hold up, and don't make up. Yeah, we haven't. All right, so yeah, we haven't got to some of the others, but yeah, so we're assembling the team. That's the idea. Like, we've got her girlfriend decides this is the thing we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna get our dream life.
Pretty much, yeah. They're like, we'll get a boat, we'll go out to the location, we'll dive under, we'll capture the jewels, and then Bob's your uncle. We've got $16 million to do with as we please. So how do they form their team? Well, both Nell and Claire agree that Lucas would be a good help because of his Navy SEAL training. Even with only one arm, he's still better than nothing. And then the last part is Russell, who he's captain of the booze cruise boat. He's recruited, and he's willing to do this because he'll be able to take care of his girlfriend, Kelly. Kelly's the mom, with his share. And so we have this moment where he's like, yeah, this is a good idea. We'll do it this way. And then when they figure out where the boat has landed or where they think the boat has sunk, it's the Devil's Triangle. And Russell's like, okay, yeah, no, I quit. I'm not doing this. I'm not taking you out there. It's a death trap. It's a huge breeding ground for sharks, and that's also where they do most of their feeding. You're not going out there. And so they're like, well, okay, we'll find another boat. And then literally the next scene, Russell returns and he says, yeah, I'm going to join with you guys because I promised your mom I'd look after you, and I don't want you girls to die. And I'm thinking, there's no tension now. Like, where's the stakes? It's set up and gone.
You need like an interceding event for him.
Right.
Like there should have been a scene where he goes back and sees her mom, and she gives him some kind of talk about how wonderful, like, you're such a good man. I know that you're going to be here for me, but not just me, but my daughter, because she's going to have a sense of mortality from the Parkinson's.
Yep.
And maybe she's like, it makes me feel good to know that there's going to be someone looking out for her when I'm gone. And it gives him some kind of guilt, right? If he's got this motivating guilt, show it to us, right? Like, don't just have him randomly come back a couple minutes later and be like, I changed my mind. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it now.
And this script missed a bunch of that because we get to them out on the water pretty quick, which is nice. But once they get out to the water and they get to the location, they find out, yep, this Coast Guard is coming back for a second search. They're about 4 hours out, 4 hours before they begin. So that gives us less than 4 hours to get down there, get what we need, and get back out. And then we find out that they have this really expensive high-tech scuba gear. They've got like a scuba suit that's like really durable, so it will prevent them from getting cut, so that their blood won't, the scent of their blood won't trigger the sharks in the area. They got an advanced fish finder. They got advanced comms. They've got all this nitrous oxygen gas that will give them longer time under the water to help resist the bends and all that stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the same type of problem that you kind of had with the Ocean's 11 gimmick, which is you have these thieves that are using millions of dollars to set up the gear they need to rob a casino vault, which has presumably maybe 10 times of the millions of dollars, but it's ignoring the fact that you have the money for this elaborate equipment. Why isn't that good enough? And here's these poor people from a hotel resort who you are supposed to infer that they borrowed this stuff from the hotel, but having been to some hotels with scuba lessons and stuff, they don't have the advanced level of gear
No,
with
like
which is
the
being
hotel
described.
resort is not going to have like, here, let me get you the top shelf gear. They have stuff that they buy on the cheap and use till exhaustion for the people who come to their resort.
Yes,
And that's even true of like the highest end resort.
100%, because it's all about saving the money. Like they'll get stuff that's like named brand things, but they'll get it at a discounted rate. But if you wanted to buy it from the resort or you wanted to buy it, from the wholesaler, you're spending like a lot of money on it. But at the same time, you're buying the brand more so than the quality, which is most of the cases when you're shopping in that area. So this kind of really stretched the imagination for me, because I'm thinking, okay, they've got these advanced comm systems that they've got the scuba gear, which is not normal scuba gear. It's basically the face mask scuba gear. So you have the scuba helmets, and then you've got these tanks, these weighted tanks. Nell has an underwater blowtorch and drill as tools so that they can break in. They've got this luminescent guiding rope that they can anchor with. They have some pretty, I would say, it's reasonable to believe that these are some pretty pricey equipment. And I think that there's like a scene missing, because I would be more inclined to believe that if they stole this gear, if not from the resort, or at least from the Coast Guard or a Navy base, considering the fact that Russell used to be in the Navy, so he would know where this type of equipment would be stored.
Or like, it's San Francisco. It's not out of the realm that they would have high-end dive shops.
Right.
Like show basically be a pre-heist before the big heist, where and this would also be a good place where you show a little bit of bonding among the crew. That's where, because there are other things that happen later where that would be helpful to help add tension to the parts that happen later in the script, right? If you have some bonding moments where you see things happening where they're getting along and working together as a team versus what we get later.
Exactly. Like, I want to get a sense of potential, like, oh, maybe they can pull this off because they did this really cool land heist that worked out really well, so they're working together. But we always want to have that looming effect of, well, the biggest difference between the land heist and this heist is they don't have to contend with great white sharks circulating all around the location. They were able to stay ahead of security and whatnot, because there's a lot more limitations for security compared to what they're doing versus, sharks, which they can swim above you, they can swim below you. You're in a dark, murkier setting, so you don't have a whole lot of light, and they're used to that low visibility. So you're at a disadvantage compared to them. They don't explore any of that type of stuff at all, because we skip over a very interesting, show a type of scene which I like to call the "show us what you got," right? So sometimes it's depicted as like a training montage where the main character is going through training and you see them fail but get up and then persevere, and you're like, okay, great, okay, we've got a sense of what their competence level is. Here we get none of that. It's just straight from, here's a lesson where they're teaching people how to clear their mask, and then next scene is, now we're on a boat out in the middle of the ocean and we're diving 200 odd feet to find this yacht to rob it.
And it's really important in a heist movie. Like, I can't think of a really great heist movie where they haven't had like the training type montage or showing people with their skills. Like even something like as silly as Entrapment with Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones. They have, and it's done to, because Catherine Zeta-Jones was very attractive. They put her in a skin tight outfit and have her bake like she's going through the laser beams.
Right.
But it's still at the same, even though it's a scene to, be able to put stuff in a trailer, that people like.
Yeah.
It also shows her practicing the skills she will need for the heist. So I don't get it. I, it would be such a small thing to add in there to show. This script is very short.
Yeah, it's only 85
We're
pages.
85 pages. There's plenty of room. There's not an issue where you're like not, you don't have room. Like, oh, my script was running on, it was already borderline like 2 hours. I couldn't keep doing it. Like,
Yeah, there's none of that. It's basically he has a lot. This writer had a lot more real estate to play with, and didn't really take advantage of it because, sadly, even though I think the premise of let's rob a yacht that sunk to the bottom of the ocean is good, parts of the tools for that premise were a little weak. For instance, the yacht has a recently sunk vessel. I think it would have been more interesting if it was something that had been lost maybe a few years ago and everybody gave up on it, but this one person didn't because they figured out something that the Coast Guard, the Navy didn't, and that gives them the advantage. And they just, now is the opportunity where they can actually do something because she's either made the connections or she now has the resources in order to achieve this goal. But instead, it's so quickly contained. And I understand why the writer did this, because there's a sense of urgency, which, they could be caught by the Coast Guard. But you bring it up only to never have it, like, this. The Coast Guard never plays into
here's
it.
a quick twist to be able to do it. They all work at that high-end resort.
Mm-hmm.
She or someone else overhears somebody who works in, because this is in San Francisco, who's like telling a friend, like, we just found this wreck and we're going to announce it publicly. We're getting our crew together. We're going out there like tomorrow or the next day. We're going to live stream it for everybody to see as we pull up this, this old treasure wreck and, and show everybody in the world to do it. That gives you the same kind of time limit, but it also keeps the Coast Guard away.
Mm-hmm.
This person doesn't know that maybe they're a dive crew. Like maybe her mom, who's the maid, overhears it and just says it in passing. And that way you get the same time constraint, but you also eliminate a lot of the other problems.
Right. You now have a race as opposed to, which you kind of do in this case, but the other player is not even on the field at this point.
Plus, the other thing this eliminates too is salvage rights.
Mm-hmm.
So, if this was a long dormant, wreck, the laws of the seas are very clear. It's like finders keepers.
Right.
Yeah. If this was an active recovery and people are still possibly alive and this just happened, you're not in the same situation.
Oh, exactly,
So,
because it's a rescue mission at this point, and if you're
which also
interfering with
eliminates it also eliminates the problem of like, how do I sell what I got?
right.
Because that's something the script never even talks about. They're going to find this treasure that they're going to presumably have to fence illegally. Who do they know to do that? Like, just because you find something that's worth $60 million doesn't mean you're going to get 60 million. Watch Pawn Stars.
Yeah.
Like, when you get an appraiser comes in and says that thing's worth 20 grand, and then they're like, well, we'll give you 1,000.
Yeah. You give you 1,000
What do you
for
think
it.
you're going to actually get for pawning something you got illegally?
Yeah, this isn't something you can sell on like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, right? Like, this is something like, if you have something of value, you've got to go to the right people, and those right people are not easy to find.
Yeah, it's not like something like in Die Hard where they got non-negotiable bearer bonds that are worth exactly what they say they're worth. Like,
Right.
You get a bearer bond, you can go to a bank and you'll be able to get that exchanged for whatever the value of the bond is. This is goods. When you fencing goods, you're taking a loss. If it's worth 60 million on paper, you're lucky to probably get a tenth of that illegally fencing it,
Yeah.
and then you've got to split that with your crew. Like maybe you should just get a better job. You're working on the same level of income gain real quick.
Relatively, yeah. I mean, and that's the thing here. It's that I've got this looming thought in my head. Even if they pull this off, where can they trade these? Because again, it's going to be more of a barter system than it is an actual sale. Like, you have, when you're fencing stuff of this type, you have to trade in various different goods of relatively similar value until you can get to the point where you're actually getting a cash exchange.
And that's where, like, you've got former Navy SEAL maybe he engaged and met with people of ill repute doing the job he did.
Yeah.
Maybe he just says, "I know a guy. If it's worth, if it's worth 60 on paper, we'll probably get 10, and we can split 10. That's still a good payday."
And
Okay.
maybe him knowing this guy might be one of the reasons why the VA is denying him coverage, because there's possibly a blemish on his record that's allowing them a legal loophole to not give him the disability he needs.
Oh, and that's something where it could also work because it doesn't even matter about the legal loophole. If people in the upper echelon of the military want to F with someone,
They can, yeah.
they can basically put their thumb on the scale and make it so the things don't happen for them. So that could be it too. But these are all lots of little things where, and this is where I like tight scripts. I like movies that flow. I don't think movies need to be 3 hours long. At the same time, if you write something that's so sparse, that moves so quickly that you're cutting out things that are necessary to make it a coherent, plausible movie, you're doing yourself a disservice the other way.
Right.
If this movie would shoot 85 to 90 minutes, maybe it might even be a little shorter because there's a lot of stuff on the page that's descriptions of scenes, like laying it out, where when you're showing it visually it'll move fast. So I would say, look, maybe, buddy, you want 105 minutes. Add like 20, 25 minutes
Mm-hmm.
in strategic spots to this script, and you're gonna do yourself a huge favor. Because I think I mean, this movie got votes on the blacklist, but it hasn't been in production. And maybe this is one of the things people are gun shy about. Like, it's got some bones to it, but it needs character moments. Like, who's going to want to be the actor in these scenes when you know that you've got barely motivation? You don't have any good backstory. There's no meat for your performance.
No, it's unfortunately it's clear as water, transparent. Um, and the other part too, like this is towards the bottom of the blacklist. It's placed 58 out of like 75, 76 scripts. So I think it charted because the gimmick of the premise is enticing enough. Like, I think an underwater heist is a cool thing, and that alone is great. And actually, we should probably get into a little bit of it, of the actual yacht itself, because they do find the yacht. They anchor in front of it. They get their luminescent line down, to guide with them. They go in through, I guess, the engine room, and then okay, I'll throw this back to you because this is a good topic of discussion. They get into the engine room, and as they get in there, they realize there's a big pocket of air. So now they can take off their scuba gear, or not so much all of it, but they can take off their helmets and save air from their tanks because they've got the air inside the yacht here, this pocket of air. And the script is very specific to point out that there's going to be a few of these areas where there's air pockets. So pay attention.
You know what was funny to me in my head as I was reading it? I just kept thinking of The Mandalorian and Pedro Pascal demanding to have scenes where he's out of the helmet.
Yeah.
It's like, or how in superhero movies they constantly find a way for the superhero to take their mask off so that you can see the actor's face.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a mixed bag because there's some actors I know that don't want that, but there's producers that want that because the face of the actor is one of the key points of why that actor was cast. And it's like, well, we got to see the face, and it's like, well, they're wearing a full facial mask. Yeah, I don't care. We got to see them. You got to see their face. So find a way to get that mask off, or they're fighting the bad guy or what have you. It's like, they're missing the point. I mean, this was also one of the reasons why a lot of filmmakers, when they do get to do the superhero film, at least back before Marvel kind of steered things the way they did, was they would rather get actors that were not well known so that it didn't matter if you saw them in the mask or not, because it wasn't their face or their reputation that you're going to see, it's the character that you're going to see, and you want to see them in the authentic, their authentic costumes. So that always kind of felt weird to me, especially it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, okay, now we have these actors and they're in the scuba gear, but they're in this advanced scuba gear, which to me, I'm looking at it like the same type of gear they wore in the movie Sphere with Dustin Hoffman and Samuel L. Jackson and
or
Sharon
even
Stone.
the latest Meg movie where they were down in the trench walking around
Yeah.
with their face illuminated. as they're talking and having their conversations 3 miles underwater.
3 miles underwater. That's the other part too. So they they're below 200 feet, and they're radio to Russell, who's anchored the boat and is keeping watch, so to speak, is only 100 feet. So once they go below 100 feet, they can't communicate with Russell, but they can still communicate with each other. They've got like lights on their scuba masks, so they can see where they're going, plus their flashlights and scuba belts with various tools on them. Like, they are decked out. It is quite.
Nell has a freaking Batman level utility belt with tools. I mean,
Yeah.
she's got like underwater plasma torches, underwater drills.
They
I
all
was
have
like,
their knives.
this sounds like really expensive equipment to work this far down and this efficiently.
Yeah. And the thing is that, okay, they're geared up, which I think the writer was thinking this is how we make it believable, is that they have the gear to survive. But I'm always of the mind, like, don't make anything easy for your protagonist. Wouldn't it be better if all they had was, like, a knife, a flashlight, and something to help them lift that safe, because they can't
Yeah,
break into it.
initially that's all I thought. That I thought the plan would be, because it's underwater. They mentioned several times it's a small safe. That their initial plan would just be get the safe, grab it, pull it out of the like
Pull
out
out
of
of the
the
water and then break into
and
it when
then
you're on the surface.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, where you have plenty of time to do whatever you need to do. Because what they're after is diamonds, right? They're after a small, like a pouch of uncut diamonds, which are allegedly worth $60 million.
So they have what's interesting is that there's a few obstacles that they face while they're on this boat, which is not bad. I mean, they've got the air pocket, but then when they realize where they have to go, they put back on their scuba mask, they submerge, they travel through various corridors until we get to this one section where it's like this underwater, it's like this aquarium, but it's also got these glass walls that have been caved in, so they're protruding shards of glass in all weird certain angles and whatnot, and it's called like the glass obstacle course. And so it's supposed to be this really intense moment, because if they nick themselves with the glass, it spews out blood, in which case some of the sharks which are around the area that they can't really see or find or localize, they're going to smell the blood and then, surround them. And part of me is wondering, well, didn't they kind of mitigate this by going into all the details of how durable these scuba suits are so that they couldn't get easily cut? So how is this glass going to be the thing that does them in, right? And they don't really establish that level of stakes. The other part too is that you're dealing with, like, why don't they have it, like as you were saying before the show, why don't they have a tool or something where they can just knock the glass clear so it falls to the ground, or why don't they just use the displacing effect of water and then just kind of push the glass back away from position? Because you can get, if there's these large panels and shards, there's going to be a flat area to it, and you can touch that safely, and you can do something with that to make it easier. And even though they still have like 90 minutes of air left, it wouldn't take too long just to quickly kind of either knock the glass away, as they're like, let Lucas go first and he can knock the glass away so that he clears a path for the other two, or they just move it out of the way somehow as they're going. Their only solution is, well, we're just going to navigate through it like worms in a tunnel. And
It made me think of just recently, earlier this year, with an Alien Romulus, where there's basically the scene where she has to go through the hallway with the acid blood floating
right,
around.
and the 0G acid blood stuff,
Yeah,
which
in
that made
that
more
context,
sense.
I thought worked, and I was like, oh, that's a unique twist on the alien acid blood that I haven't seen in the 5 or 6 movies before, so I'm cool with that. And also, there's no good way to push acid out of the way.
Yeah, because if it
Like, you
hits the
can't.
walls, it decompresses the area. So
Yeah, and if you touch it to try to move it, you're burning your own hand. So that was a lot more like as a justification to try to like snake your way through, worked a lot better than we're underwater in this wreck and there's a room with shards of glass sticking out, and like you said, we're not going to move the panels. We're not going to go look for pieces. Like, we're in this, yeah, we could go get like presumably there's probably some wood and other
Chairs, anything. Yeah.
things you could grab that you could start breaking the glass down into smaller pieces and then just push them aside.
Ex-
I mean, the reason this hallway is the way it is, there's a couple, yeah, it's clearly for a later scene.
yes.
It has to, like the writer worked backwards because he had a vision of what happens later, so he needed it to be that way earlier. It's a bootstrap paradox in script writing.
Pretty
Like,
much.
for what happens in the future, it has to happen in the past.
Exactly. The reverse engineering of it. The other part too is it's not the most logical cause and effect situation, because let's say the glass is the reason it shatters is because of the pressure of the water and it caved it all in. Well, if anything, there wouldn't be any shards. There'd be some shards floating around, but there wouldn't be any sort of jutting out from the wall itself. They'd have been completely knocked out of their frame. They would be on the ground, or a few of them floating around towards the ceiling or other parts of the area. They would be so easily moved just by like you making a breaststroke underwater, because the displacement that you're putting of the water would move the glass out of the way.
And they should not have any support enough to puncture you.
Right.
Like they should be floating around to the point where even if they were the sharpest thing in the world, with that neoprene suit you're wearing in the water, with displacement, they're not gonna have force to puncture in. They're just gonna move. They're gonna brush out of the way.
Exactly. So, anyways, they navigate through this. I think Nell catches one in the thin portion between her fingers of her glove, and then it's fine, and then pulls it out, and then they continue onward.
That one didn't make sense to me. Like she said, it came in like that. The description of it, I was like, how is blood not coming out? But somehow they said it was like the perfect in the fin part, so it didn't puncture through and
didn't cut the skin. Right. But I'm like, it's still, that's all right. Okay, I get what you're doing there. You're trying to show a little bit of danger, but it just didn't work for me. And that was a section of the script I had to reread a couple of times, because I was like with you. I was like, wait, did it cut her finger? Did it cut her palm? Or is it okay? So it's the webbing. They're wearing webbed gloves, to swim faster. Okay, would have been nice if they kind of better established that before going into the dive.
I see in the chat someone asked, so Nell becomes an underwater welder in a day for this job, essentially.
Yes,
she does. It's like it would be great if they had a montage of her doing things where you saw her these, like, either not just training, but when we see her doing work for her job, right?
Right.
Maybe there's an incident where she's out scuba diving with her rich people, and there's something where she has to break something they got caught on, and so she just takes out her little tools and does stuff. Show capability, like give me something previously to hang my hat on so I can justify what I'm seeing from her later.
I mean, that's all you got to do. Yeah, really.
There's nothing, and all we saw of her working was being in a resort pool showing people how to put scuba masks on. That's it.
Yeah, there's no other skills. Background. Like, it would have been interesting if they said, "Hey, Nell, there's a hole in one of the tanks underwater. We need you to go patch it up." She's like, "Well, where's the welder guy?" He's like, "Well, he's too expensive, but you know how to do it, so you go down and do it." And she's like, "Ah," and then you're like, "Oh, there's the equipment. There's what she does. There's her experience. Okay, we get it. The resort's saving money on labor by having one of their dive instructors who knows how to do some underwater welding."
You can increase the guilt at the same time, right? Maybe you don't make the manager such a d-bag, right? You see the fact that her mom just can't do the job anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the manager asks her to come over, like, "Hey, Nell, I need you to go fix X, Y, and Z." And she's like, "Why are you keep asking me?" He's like, "Look, Nell, you know the only reason I keep your mom around is because you do a lot of these things for me and make my life easier. If you can't do it, that's fine, but I don't have any reason to have a maid who can't do her job."
There you go. Yeah.
And right there, bam, you show her using skills that she has, and you increase the guilt of her wanting to take care of a mother. There's little things like that where you can twist it, and you give the audience what they need to, number one, give Nell more motivation to do the heist, and number two, show that she's got umpteen skills beyond just showing people how to wear a scuba mask.
Exactly. I mean, it's It's kind of it was frustrating to read because it's like we were discovering the skills of these characters as they're happening without any setup to see that they can do it, and then a wrench will be thrown in later on in some cases to show, oh, this is how difficult it actually is. It feels to them, I mean, really, it feels like this writer just watched a bunch of movies and then aped them to try and fit into his own story, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's how a lot of people kind of start off writing and doing their stuff, but he's missing the core essentials as to why an audience would keep reading or why an audience would keep watching this film. Is you need to establish, the limitations of the character, the level of believability in the task and choices that they're making, and then a little bit of empathy as to what drives those motivations. And this script doesn't really land on any of those for these characters at all. The closest possibly being Lucas, because he wants that VA disability so that he can, make a better life.
They give Lucas actually the most motivation and backstory of anybody. And that's not to say that it's great. Mm-hmm. It's just that he is the most. They have the VA denial. We have the failed relationship with Nell, where they established that they were previously together and then Nell moved on with her girlfriend.
Right.
And they also now have the part where they establish through dialogue and him talking that he has a strained relationship with his father, and one of the things he wants to do with after the heist is to basically use the money he gains to go and show off in front of his dad to show, look what I did make something of myself, you a-hole. So he has the most stated motivation for a lot of what he's doing.
Right.
Because with the VA denial, he's really got nothing left to lose. He's got the chip on his shoulder for wanting to, be a success, and he's got the failed relationship with Nell that's motivating him to be with her. So, I feel weird that I have the most knowledge of Lucas's motivation out of all of them. Like Nell, we sort of think we know, but it doesn't make sense because she wasn't interested in doing that, and there's not enough to show how she suddenly got guilted into doing it, aside from one shot where she's worried about her mom, even though nothing's really changed from when she said no to when she said yes.
Exactly. Like it's almost as if the writer didn't know which one is the main character at some point. Because even when we're in the boat, it's usually like Claire and Lucas doing most of the leading and Nell is just kind of following behind. When they do make it out of that weird, jagged glass tunnel, they find themselves in the yacht owner's bedroom, and they're looking for the safe and they can't find it, and they're looking everywhere until Nell remembers from the video, oh yeah, he basically says every king has a throne, and he's referring to his bed, but that's not the right connotation for the term king's throne. King's throne is a toilet, and it has nothing to do with the bed.
But luckily that managed to work, and she used her super mega scuba tool to drill through the bed.
Yeah, she chops up the bed with her knife, reaches inside, pulls out the little safe, and then uses her torch to break off the hinges. She immediately reaches inside, and then we find out, oh, the safe is empty. Nothing's in there, and everybody is really upset. But one of the things that's been occurring since they've gotten to this portion of the ship is they keep hearing a banging noise, rhythmic, every so often. And they speculate that what if somebody managed to survive still down here? And
I thought for people who work in the ocean, I thought it's a well-known thing in like wrecks that the survivors will do the banging to let you know where they're at.
Yes, and that can be heard. Especially with the technology that Coast Guards and the Navy has. And we know this more recently, tragically, because of the Titan expedition over off on the Atlantic Ocean that imploded tragically a little over a year ago. So, they heard a banging. It was a one-time thing, but they had no idea what exactly it was, but they were able to localize it. And then after several days, they were able to confirm what they heard and what they found. The same should also apply here. They heard a banging. Okay, Well, we hear it again a couple of, an hour later or a half hour later. No, we hear it again. Something is causing that. So we better go out and investigate. You would think that would have been found the first time when the Coast Guard got out there to do their survey to find where this yacht had fallen. But, our team here managed to find their way through the corridors to a door, and they managed to pry it open, and inside is a self-contained room with air, food, toiletries, the whole 9, and the rich billionaire's son. Surprised that someone finally found him, and realizes pretty quick that these 3 are not here to rescue him.
They also do a thing in the script where they set up, when they find the room that they mentioned, there's claw marks on the outside of the door.
Yeah, that's right.
To verify that this guy's a super douchebag, because there were survivors trying to get in there with him and he wouldn't let them in.
And apparently this room could sustain him for a few months, which I have to say, that's pretty impressive engineering. And
I don't know if they meant if he got if there was someone invading the boat and it hadn't sunk.
Yeah.
And so it would basically be a safe room where it could, sustain him as long as there was air, because if it was above the water, there'd be a way to supply air in fairly regularly.
Exactly. But here it's below the water. It's got its own generator. It's all separately powered. And here I'm wondering is well, wouldn't it also have either at the very minimum a ham radio or some sort of distress beacon that you could trigger to let people know you're alive and that you're in this room? And just more questions were raised, but this guy acts like a douche. He talks about how, he's the people are going to rescue him, and of course the 3 make a deal. It's well, you give us the diamonds, we'll take you up to our boat. It would only take an hour, and he agrees to it, but instead of just handing over the diamonds, he decides to swallow them all because he's not going to trust them to let him live, which I thought was kind of funny. But then we get something which I wasn't 100% expecting, but when it happened, I'm like, okay, yeah, that I see why they did it that way. And that is, well, this douchebag, he swallows the diamonds, but he doesn't swallow all of them. In fact, he chokes to death on a few of them and dies pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah, I actually thought that was a nice touch, but and then they have run into their next choice.
The next choice is that do they leave without the diamonds or do they find a way to get them? And
do they try to take the body with them?
Right.
Do they leave without the diamonds, or do they do something else?
And they do something else. They manage to go into I guess the kitchen area, and they seal off this large fridge so that they can operate on this guy and not have the blood leak into the water to trigger the sharks. We then get a call back to the first Mission Impossible film, because they do slice open the dude. They do get the diamonds. And then there's this knife pinned to the wall, and a little drop of blood streams down the handle, and it's about to drop into the water, but Lucas reaches out his hand and catches it before. And they manage to, I guess, tie everything off. They put these diamonds into this yellow pouch, which Claire affixes to her belt, I guess.
Yeah, she pops it onto her dive belt.
And then they get out of the freezer, they lock it up, and they're like, okay, we're home free now. All we have to do is just get to the surface. And that's basically it. They make their way to the surface, but as they're doing so, they see the shadow of this very large shark, which we don't get a huge description of as of yet, but the shark is codenamed the Queen, which I thought was kind of funny. And they managed to, I guess, get out of the boat. This is where the script gets a little bit more murky, because there are some parts where I'm like, oh, they're out of the boat and they're basically just it's just water between them and the surface. There's nothing else to get through aside from this little, this out marsh.
Yeah, like a kelp bed
kelp forest type of thing. And And so I'm thinking, okay, so they managed to get out of the boat and they're going up. And then all of a sudden, as they're leaving, Lucas decides to betray the two and he slices Nell's Achilles
Nell's
heel.
Achilles tendon. Yeah.
And so now she's trailing blood. This allows the queen to get attention to them. And the queen is described pretty much as like Jaws' sister. It's 18 feet long. It's huge. It's got scars all over its body. So it's clearly been around for a while. And it's barreling down on them. And Lucas manages to get the pouch. He manages to get away. And he swims up the line, causing Nell and Claire to fend for themselves. And so we get into this weird set of set pieces where they're kind of trying to stay ahead of not just that shark, but some of the other sharks in the area. At one point, Lucas and Claire kind of reconnect for a moment, and they have their own type of little fight. And Lucas gets kind of snatched away, and Claire manages to grab the pouch of diamonds back.
Yep.
And this is, again, I'm back to murkiness because I'm like, well, where are they? Are they still in the yacht or are they outside of the yacht? And if they're outside the yacht, what's stopping them from ascending aside from the fact that they have to have a controlled ascent because they don't want to get the bends? And it's just weird. Like, this is where it kind of gets messy. But we find that this all leads up to the big set piece where Nell is leading. Well, first of all, she proposes to Claire and takes out one of the big diamonds to give to her and basically like pretends to affix it on her finger as an engagement ring. And then Claire puts it in the chest pouch of Nell, says, hold on to this one for me while we go. Somehow they had time to do this. They start navigating through the boat again, and they lead the queen shark through that shard of glass maze where it basically just powers through, but it also somehow dies.
Yeah, we're leaving out the part where Claire's brilliant idea was to cut her own hand.
Oh, you're right. She had to cut her own hand so that there'd be another scent of blood.
To lure the queen into the shard hallway.
Right. And it works.
And it reminds, what scene would it make me think of? It was if you remember The Faculty.
Yes.
When they're running through the closing bleachers,
right,
and the monster is chasing them as it gets, and as they're closing, it's going in on it. Because in this case, they're supposedly swimming through this spiral of glass as the shark is just barreling through the spiral of glass, and the shark is getting cut and cut and cut, like death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing, and eventually stops like just short of where they're at because it's finally been hurt enough.
It's been hurt enough. It's presumed dead, but it's not the end of it.
By the way, it definitely needs to be dead because one way or the other, if a shark's not moving, if a great white isn't moving anymore, it's not breathing.
That's right. And that's something I spaced out. We talked about this before the show, but you brought it up again because I'm glad you did. Because, yes, there's a number of times where not just this shark, but other sharks are behaving in ways that they can't physically behave. Like, for instance, the shark cannot stop mid-tracks like abruptly and then swim backwards because that's not how water gets through the gills and it dies. But what a shark can do is it can slow down, it can maneuver, it can turn, it can twist, it can do all these other things, but it has to always kind of be in a form of motion. It never stops. And the other part too is like sharks also, as far as we know, they don't sleep. So they're always awake. They're always actively doing something. And if they aren't moving, they are essentially dead. They also can't like back up and then charge forward. They actually have to swim in like a circle in order to gain speed and momentum to charge forward and attack. And there's a couple of times where before they even get to the glass maze or spiral of death, so to speak, they manage to trap it in like an oven or something, and the shark is able to pound through the door.
It was the refrigerator.
Oh, the other refrigerator. The walk-in fridge, which even a walk-in fridge, I don't think a walk-in fridge is more than 20 square feet, which is not enough for an 18-foot shark to swing around and gain momentum to puncture the door.
I mean, outside of deep blue sea, sharks shouldn't be doing this kind of stuff, and those were special genetics.
They were genetically engineered sharks, so they had that that was their strange attractor that allowed you to buy into what they could do. Here, this is just Mother Nature, you know, looking for a meal. So we have these weird incongruities with shark behavior. The queen is now dead, but it's not the end of the queen, because we find out the queen was pregnant and 3 pup sharks.
Okay, we didn't mention this in the in our pre-show.
Right.
But when I got to that part and all of a sudden like she was birthing shark pups, I was like, what the F?
Yeah.
I mean, like there's parts where I was like, okay, it's not great. It's not great. This was like in Godzilla in 1998. When they somehow got into the Madison Square Garden, and all of a sudden we have raptor-sized Godzillas because Jurassic Park was a big hit.
Yep.
So it's like we need raptor versions. Like, and of course she's birthing, and I don't, again, logistics. Like she's suddenly popping out 5 or 6.
No,
5 to 8.
she's pumping out 3 5-foot sharks.
Yeah, 3 5-foot sharks, and good luck explaining how they were stuffed in there.
Yeah. Yep.
And these sharks are like ready to go from like moment one. It's like we're killing machine, which could be true. I don't, maybe great whites, but the behavior seemed really, they immediately started. This is where the script confused me too, because then they started with supposedly devouring their mother.
Yeah,
Like
feasting on it. Yeah.
But then that apparently, later on, maybe not.
Yeah.
Like,
something else happened. Yeah, that's. Oh boy, yeah, that it gets in. I mean, the thing is, it does escalate into its extremeness.
It's funny. I had forgotten about the sharks devouring their mom till right now, and now it's even worse what happens later. It's like,
oh
wait a
god,
second.
it really is. But I mean, we're kind of coming up towards the end of the second act, and the third act, it just gets a little more schlocky. So I mean, we'll probably have to call it there, but. I will say this: we don't really get a proper payoff for Lucas's betrayal.
No.
It does have a little bit of that classical like thriller horror, picking one character off at a time type of thing going on. There's a shift in focus over Nell's character. And how she manages to power through with Claire to try and escape this death trap, and all the while, sadly, there is no sign of the Coast Guard or anyone else coming in yet. So the ticking clock aspect that they have kind of gets defeated because there's no point, there's no sort of metric for which we can measure to see that if they could get caught, trying to pillage this yacht when there's a potential for survivors, and the potential for survivor ends up being true, what will happen to them next? We don't get any of that exploration. So, little Chad, what are your final thoughts before we go over to the rating of this script?
I know that some people in chat have brought up some good points about how there's been incidents here and there where things like that may have happened. I just hate it when there's somehow every random thing that may have happened once in recorded time suddenly it's happening all at once. It's bad. I think we've talked about this is true for a lot of our scripts. There's something here that could be very interesting. Mm-hmm. It rushes things. It needs more scenes to develop the character. I definitely would need a lot more time with something with Nell to make me root for her. I was not rooting for her and really just had to muster, F's to give for her character. Because she was not doing anything for me on the page. Like we talked about, Lucas had more backstory. Nell there's nothing there that I found super compelling. And I think it's something where a few more scenes setting up in the first act who she was. Mm-hmm. And like maybe her struggle and why this is something she would do, how she had a skill set to do it, but was maybe untapped,
right,
would have helped so much more. And we had plenty of time to do it. This was I swear to God, I read this script in about 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's again, 85 pages. It's a very fast read. Even Claire has a little bit more substance with her character because, she has that moment where she's like, when she was a child, she just wanted to leave South Africa because she thought the American dream was what she wanted. Now that she's here and things have changed back home, she's ready to go back to make a life for her. And it's like, okay, but again, it's such a throwaway. It doesn't really have that impact. And it makes me scratch my head as to, well, why are we getting this level of detail from the supporting characters and not anything really with Nell? Like, her motivation is that she feels sorry for her mom and she wants a better life for her, but she's not active in doing anything to achieve that goal. Like, compared to Star Wars, Luke, what's he doing? What's the first thing we learn from him when he gets to sit down? He's like, hey, if those droids work out, maybe I can go apply to the academy. Because I can't hang out with my friends because Uncle Owen keeps telling me to do chores. So we see that he has this desire to not be on the farm. I mean, that's the goal. It's the easiest one to pick up, and it's done very effectively and quickly. Here, we don't get a sense that she's trying to leave this job. We don't get a sense that she's got a fantasy over the horizon that she's striving towards. We do with Claire, but not with Nell. And yeah, there's just nothing for her. So us following her in this story feels very empty.
Yeah, and that's a problem. If this is like we talked about, there's 4 characters we're essentially with from start to end, and by the end it's less than that.
Yeah.
So there's only one our main protagonist who's there throughout. And if you can't root for that person, this isn't an ensemble where other people are picking up the slack, and doing it where you can, like in Ocean's 11, right?
Right.
You're not the biggest Clooney fan, but you saw but you got enough of Pitt to make it work for you, or this or that, where there's 8 other people who have a lot of significant time, to help pick up slack if you don't like the protagonist, main one so much. This main protagonist has to work.
Yeah.
Has to do it for people. It has to be clear motivation, someone you root for. You don't want to make it so that they're kind of bland and just kind of disappear on the page. Well, and that's my biggest problem with this, is that Nell was an empty vessel that I didn't really have any motivation to root for.
Yeah, and when she finally does get some action set pieces, they are ridiculous. Like, there's some screaming moments, there's some bringing up the drill and the blowtorch again. It's like the writer at the very last second was like, oh, wait, I need her to be like Ripley from Aliens. Only there's no Newt for her to fight for. So she's doing some stuff that you're wondering, well, where did this come from? And so you can't really get behind it. And yeah, it's like I'd rather they shifted over. Like, I would, as weird as it is to say, I'd rather see Lucas's story as the main character, where he's doing this not just to cover his own debts and have a better life, but maybe he feels like, hey, if I get these diamonds, maybe I can convince my ex-girlfriend who left me for another woman to come back and we can start a proper family. And there's those types of motivations that make sense, right? Like, what else is there that can drive this story more forward? And
hell, I would say would be an interesting twist is through the second act, when Lucas has the betrayal. You completely subvert, I hate using the term, subvert the expectations, and Lucas leaves everybody behind and we follow him.
Yeah.
Getting back to the mainland, fencing the diamonds, trying to live the life where he's now got to look over his shoulder in case someone's coming after him. That might be more interesting, than what we got. I get the conceit of just having the Jaws type stuff where they're fighting the sharks.
Yeah.
But you got a heist movie, lean into the heist element, and then twist it to a thriller. Where
go psycho.
He betrayed these people.
Yeah.
And he doesn't realize, and maybe he's not sure they're dead.
Yeah, he did. Go a little psycho, where he takes off with the jewels. He doesn't return to the boat. He manages, because he's Navy, he manages to just drift his way back to shore, It'll
Or he
take
made,
hours.
he was planning the betrayal from the beginning, and he had another ship come in and get him.
Or that,
And
yeah.
so they left that other one there to make it look like these were the people going to steal things, and they all died.
And they all died, and now he's like, he thinks
Yep.
he's in the clear, but then out of the corner of the eye, he recognizes like either Nell or Claire, and then when he chases them down, it's like, oh, it's not them, but now he's hallucinating, and then you bring in another antagonist to mess with him for the rest of the script. That would have been a very different direction, and one that I think, yeah, would make this script a lot more interesting. I'm already seeing the wheels spin, and I'm thinking, yeah, you could play a lot around with that a lot.
Yeah. Because, like you brought up with Psycho, it's a famous thing where everybody thought through the first act it was a completely different movie than what they ended up getting.
Right.
To the point where that's why, famously Alfred Hitchcock was like, don't tell anybody what Psycho's actually about.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to ruin it. Because you don't want everybody to know Janet Leigh dies right in the main thing, and it's not about her.
Yep.
You're watching, because that movie is famous because you think you're watching a heist movie where she's stealing this money and leaving, and then it completely turns on its head. I would love, because we've had a lot of Jaws knockoffs, and
Hmm.
we've had some that are better than others, and ones where you get like a Deep Blue Sea where they use something different to try to make the sharks justify like how crazy good they are at doing silly things. But something like this, like how cool would it be where everyone thinks they're just getting a shark Jaws type movie and it turns into like a heist thriller?
Yeah.
That would be a unique, that to me is like Usual Suspects level twist where it really works because you completely, again, I hate saying subvert expectations, but that's in the good way
Well,
where you're not trying to piss off the audience. You're just
it's
trying to
it's not
deliver
even
something different.
it's not a subversion. It's a classic twist. It's the twist that rewards.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
because it's like, oh, you don't see it coming, but once you complete the movie, you realize that makes perfect sense. That's exactly how you would do it. Um, with Psycho, with say The Sixth Sense, to the more prominent ones with that, drastic turn. It's like, yeah, those stories make sense because that's how it was setting up for this anyways. It was it's a form of magic. It's we direct your eyes over here without showing you what we're doing in the background, and then when you least expect it, the background takes over as the foreground, and everything that you just saw is thrown for a loop. But as the background expands, you realize how well it actually connects to everything that came before it, because that's one of the things that's brilliant with Psycho is that once she's dead, and it's Bateman, the Bates, Norman Bates is kind of like leading the story at this point. It's her sister and and that sister's friend, if I'm remembering it correctly, are now investigating the hotel because they're looking for their sister, and it has nothing to do with the money anymore, and it has nothing to do with the fact. And Norman Bates has no idea about the money. He's just trying to hide the fact that he killed this woman, and that's the direction of the story for the rest of the film, and it plays off really well because there's always that underlying aspect where they know that money was taken as well, but he doesn't know about it, and he doesn't even really know if he needs the money or not. It's a non sequitur to him. All he cares about is like, I just can't let these people realize that their sister was murdered by my mother / me, and that's what's at stake. Is his isolated world is in jeopardy because he did this one thing.
And it's such a blind spot for current Hollywood.
Hmm.
They don't make like the one of the genres and fields they seemingly have abandoned for feature film releases theatrically is like mid-budget 50 to 60 million dollar thriller type movies. It's and they used to be when I was working for AMC, those things were great for fall and spring to
Hmm.
try to get people in the like Identity. You got movies like where
Talented
it's
Mr.
not very
Ripley, yeah.
expensive to make. Yeah, Talented Mr. You would get people in the theaters in a more off-season setting because it's not a standard like slasher horror movie where you're getting teenagers. This would be something that would draw adults 30s and 40s and 50s into the theater in an off-season sitting because they like these kinds of movies and they would go see them. And I know that streaming is basically, they said, like, they've abandoned that genre for streaming. But I think it could still work, and there's still a lot of play. Like, I'm a very big defender of the theatrical release,
Hmm.
and these are the kinds of things they need to lean into, because the future that will save Hollywood isn't $300 million franchise productions. It's $60 million movies that, when they hit and make big money, can profit your studio immensely.
Exactly. And the fact of the matter is that the Wall Street metrics prove this by saying if you spend $100 million a year, you have a chance to make $1 billion at the box office. But some idiot equated that to per movie, as opposed to, no, it's multiple movies. If you spend $100 million on multiple movies, you have a better odds of making $1 billion in the box office than you would had you just spent $100 million on one movie. And the fact that you have a whole wing of executives that didn't pick up on that report in the way that they should have just shows you how we are starved for premises like this script, but clearly, like, the level of execution is just not where it's at. But it's not to say, oh, you get a producer that sees the potential, says, these are the notes, this is the direction I want you to go. If we can refine this thing, we could probably make, a good $80 to $120 million at the box office on a modest budget of 10 or less. Like, and that's a really good win. That's a good strategy. That's like what Blumhouse had been doing for a long time. So, okay, those are some great thoughts, little Chad. So, with that being said, is this script a green light or a pass?
This is a pass.
Yeah.
This is a pass for me.
No, this is a pass for me as well. Great concept. As I say, concept is king, but execution is emperor. And the execution just wasn't there for me. I do hope the writers listen to this, because, like, that idea of, like, give it the Psycho or the Sixth Sense twist effect and follow Lucas, making him, on the run, so to speak, that might be the very thing that this script needs to make it a movie that people would talk about.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, here's the funny thing. This script, as it is, could be split. This writer could split it and basically get two movies out of what he's made.
Yeah.
He could refine it into one version where it becomes an underwater Jaws type, clone,
Mm-hmm.
where you basically make it an old wreck and uptick the shark hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other hand, you could make it a completely different, where you keep it modern day with stealing the diamonds and make it like that thriller twist that we did. And you could do both, and they would be so different enough that you could get two scripts out of it that could probably work.
Yeah, you could. Man, that's... Heck, you could actually make it a sequel type of thing where you do the one with Lucas, he gets away, you follow his story, and then you come back a few years later and they go back to the boat because there's still more treasure to be there, but it's another set of characters that learn the story after whatever ends up happening to that Lucas guy. So then you've got your salvage rights, and then you've got the return of the Queen. Oh, it survived. It's, all that type of stuff. It's now a little bigger. It's 22 feet now instead of 18 or whatever. You can play up with it, because, again, you do have far more than what I think is comfortable producers that want to make everything a franchise. So take this interesting premise, have this one boat at the bottom of this ocean, and you have your thriller story as part A. You come back to it some years later, another team, part B, that's where they face the sharks, and maybe you come up with a third angle as well to make it a trilogy, and there you go.
Yeah,
You've
and
got
there's
this.
right at the beginning, you have the group of thieves meetings. Look, we all know about the diamond heist that went wrong a few years back.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
here's what they didn't know. You know what else was on this boat? XYZ or whatever.
Exactly.
Like,
There's always something on the boat, and that would be and if you wanted to lead into the schlocky part of it, there's your gimmick, right? They keep going back to this boat every movie to find a new treasure that nobody knew about prior. and they face different obstacles. Like, first one, you got some sharks. Maybe there's a kraken or something in the third one. Who knows? Like, there's potential here, but I mean, it's just I think the writer was trying to play it a little bit safe, but also was trying to keep it a little bit too simple on the character side of things, and the plot itself, I think, was a tad closer on the complex side, which is probably why it it didn't track well all the way through, because your safest bet is have a very simple plot and have very complex characters. And the idea is that you want to make those complex characters well established at the start, so that when they're interacting, when the stakes are raised, you understand each character's point of view and the conflict that they're posing with each other, trying to achieve their own selfish goals. And we only really got that with Lucas when he betrayed them at first, because Nell and Claire, their goals were basically, we just want a better life. Claire's got the plan and Nell's just there for the ride. And because Nell's there for the ride, we don't have as much connection to her as we would the other characters. And I think if the writer can fix that and maybe take it into a slightly different direction, either using the suggestions we made or coming up with their own, I think they'd have something worth doing it, worth putting into production. But for me, this script as it is also a pass as well. As always, I do recommend, if you are curious about the script and want to read it, you can reach out to me on the Twitter X's or via my Patreon, and I'll be happy to hook that up with you. As always, please don't try to share the script to make it go viral, because this is someone's work, and we're hoping that they do manage to use it to get either produced or to a future job down the road. Before we call it, little Chad, anything else you want to say or plug before we call it for the night?
I co-host a couple shows that people can hang out and watch on Brahma Bull's channel. Sundays I do a political show with him called The Bullpen, so that'll be tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern. And then on my own channel with my co-host Slender Dad, we do the Ascendant Art podcast. Script's been on before. Mm-hmm. It's a fun show. We kind of just talk about whatever's been happening that week. Yesterday we were doing a lot on the ADL going after Steam, which is an interesting topic that led to some fun conversation. So it's a good way to end the week, and I know that most people who hang out in the chat have a good time. So hopefully I'll see you guys there.
All right. Well, as always, little Chad, thank you so much for joining us this week. You can find his link in the description and also in the live chat here. With that, I want to wish everyone listening, whether it's live or on the recording, a wonderful weekend. We'll see you all next week. And never forget, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.